Show. It is Saturday, April 29th, 2023, and we are here for a very special purpose and with one of our esteemed scholars, Dr. Charles Finch, who is an Egyptian scholar and author, researcher. Hotep, my brother, how are you doing today?
Hotep to you. I'm doing just fine. I'm
Absolute.
Always happy about.
Okay, hold on. Your signal's breaking up a little bit. Okay, you said you're always happy about what?
The fact that my health is good.
Oh, absolutely, that your health is good. Well, health is wealth. So we have to understand that, brother. And as we get older, I'll be 52 in June of this year. So as we get older, yes, health is wealth. Well, you and I would talk. Go ahead.
You are a young boy. You're 52? You're
52 June 7th.
Boy. You're a young boy. you ain't by more than 20 years.
Right. Yeah, well, Dr. Little Jeffries is one of my teachers, and he calls me a youngster. So, I said, Dr. J, I'm 51. He said, you're a youngster. Okay. So for those that don't know, Dr. Charles Finch and I, we were talking on Facebook, and we'll let him go ahead and we'll let him get straight on that side. But Netflix, Jada Pinkett Smith through Netflix has a new documentary series called African Queens. The first installment that was released dealt with Queen Nzinga of Matamba, which is modern day Angola. And we talked to one of my teachers, Professor James Small, about that because he was one of the consultants on that project. The second installment in the series deals with Queen Cleopatra VII of Egypt. And the trailer has been released recently. Now, the actual installment airs May 10th. So all people have seen is a 2-minute trailer, but the trailer has been receiving a lot of backlash from some of those in Egypt, descendants of Arabs, about the depiction of Queen Cleopatra VII. So they have African American actress Adele James portraying Cleopatra, and recently the director for this installment, Tina Garavi, wrote an article for Variety.com, and I'll pull up the article here in just a minute. And she asked the question, "What bothers you so much about a Black Cleopatra?" So, Dr. Charles Finch, I know you were commenting on this on Facebook and commenting about the complexion of what Cleopatra would have looked like, etc. So I wanted you to weigh in on this conversation. And last week when we interviewed Tony Browder, my friend and your friend Tony Browder, author of Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization, Browder mentioned your name the number of times in that interview. So I said, well, we got to have Dr. Charles Finch on the show as well. So go ahead and give us your take on this whole controversy, and then I know you want to bring in the historical context as well.
Yeah.
Okay, can you hear me? Go ahead.
Yeah, you are breaking up too. You kind of come in and you go out. I don't know what to do about that. You
okay.
Come in and out.
Okay. So
can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Go ahead and tell people, what is your perspective on this debate on Cleopatra, and share with us the historical information you wanted to share to put this in a historical context as well.
There is no debate. There is none. Cleopatra was descended from Ptolemies. Were Ptolemy. Who were the Ptolemy? Ptolemy was one of Alexander's conquests,
right?
And the native Egyptians there happy for him to conquer Egypt. Why? Because at that under the domination Persians, and they hated the Persians. The Persians just treated them like slaves, and they were happy to welcome and assist Alexander in his conquest of Egypt because he got rid of the Persians. All right, completely,
right,
forever. Anyway, the inherited the might say from Alexander. Alexander died young.
Mm-hmm.
He was in his early. He divided his empire among his generals, and the general name called Lemy. He inherited he took over Egypt, and for the next 300 years, and his descendants, ruled Egypt. Cleopatra of the last Ptolemy. All right. Now, what happened was he was extremely dynamic and intelligent, and had her own, I don't know if you want to call it ambitions, or at least her own ideas about how Egypt should be ruled. Why was that an issue? Because strictly speaking, it was supposed to descend to a male. But her brother, at the time that Ptolemy died, passed on, was like 9 years old.
Right.
Anything else. And so Cleopatra, who was older, she was like 17 or 18, wasn't very older herself, ruling Egypt. And little by little, really assumed all of the power that entailed. Now, by that time, Egypt was under the control. Well, let me see. Yeah, the Ptolemy coming under the control more and more of the Romans. Okay, and this is where the drama of Cleopatra has made such an impact, because those Romans included who? Caesar and Mark Antony. Julius Caesar and Mark Antony.
Right.
Both of them. Caesar just fell total spell when he conquered Egypt. All right. And not only was he willing to share power with her in Egypt. Oh my goodness. There are those who think that the assassination of Julius Caesar was at least in part motivated by his relationship with Cleopatra, because it looked like, for all intents and purposes, he was going to make Cleopatra empress of Rome.
Okay. It looked like he was going to make Cleopatra empress of Rome. Okay. All right. And while we try to get his connection, reestablished here and increase the signal strength. Some of you all saw me on Roland Martin Unfiltered. Some of you all saw the broadcast that I did Sunday night on the African History Network show, where we dealt with this topic. This is one of the articles we talked about. Queen Cleopatra, director speaks out. What bothers you so much about a Black Cleopatra? This is from Variety.com. This is written by Tina Garavi, who is the director of this installment of African Queens. Okay. We've got Joya watching us, and a number of people watching us. Now, let me give you some background information on Dr. Charles Finch. Dr. Charles Finch was, until June 30th, 2007, director of international health at the Morehouse School of Medicine. He is a 1971 graduate of Yale University. and a 1976 graduate of Jefferson Medical College. So he is a medical doctor. He completed a family medicine residency at the University of California, Irvine Medical Center in 1979. Dr. Finch joined the Department of Family Medicine at the Morehouse School of Medicine in 1982, and then the Office of International Health in 1989. Okay, eventually becoming the principal investigator of a traditional healer survey among the Sarah people of Senegal in 1991-1992. Now, Dr. Finch has conducted independent studies in African antiquities, comparative religion, anthropology, and ancient science in 1971. Since 1982, Dr. Charles Finch has published more than a dozen articles, including the African background of medical science and science and symbol in Egyptian medicine. Okay, go ahead. And so, Dr. Finch, I want you to go ahead, and you were explaining Queen Cleopatra, and you left off saying that some people feared that Julius Caesar would make her empress of Rome, if I remember correctly. You were saying
the Romans, at least the Roman Senate, was totally opposed to Cleopatra assuming any position of power in Rome itself.
Okay.
And so that was, at least in part, it is said, for the assassination of Julius Caesar. And once that happened, she left Rome, and she didn't come by herself. She had her own little fleet, and she went back to Egypt. And who was there in Egypt, or who followed her? Because he had already established contact with her in Rome, was none other than Mark Antony.
Okay.
Excuse me. And so she reestablished her place in Rome with Mark Antony by her side. But the problem with that was that Mark Antony was married. He was married to a Roman woman. I think the woman he married was actually related to Augustus Caesar. Now, Augustus Caesar was the nephew of Julius Caesar, and so already there was a potential source of conflict between Augustus Caesar and Mark Antony.
Okay.
Now, what exacerbated that was Mark Antony's infatuation with Cleopatra. It is said that all Cleopatra had to do was look in your eyes of a man to captivate him. And she was not old. She was like in her late teens, early 20s.
Right.
And these men, Mark Antony and Julius Caesar, were each one of them old enough to be her father. They were in their 40s, 50s even. So, but that was Cleopatra. She had this aura, this lure, and she was ambitious to the nth degree, in the sense that she wanted to reestablish the independence of Egypt insofar as was possible with her at the head of state. And she did everything. And part of her, and not part of her technique, was what I want to say, her strategy for doing that was to, shall we say, enrapture Julius Caesar on the one hand and Mark Antony on the other. And each one of them fell into her, like I said, fell under her spell, you might say, right, one by one. And she, especially after Julius Caesar was assassinated, she went back to Egypt. And I don't know whether Mark Antony actually followed her or was with her or was in Egypt. No, I think he followed her, or maybe was even with her when she went back to Egypt to reestablish her reign and her rule. But the problem for her design, shall we say, her ambition was none other than Augustus Caesar, who was Julius Caesar's nephew.
Okay.
And Augustus in Latin means great. All right.
Right.
Greater, powerful. And he got that. He gave himself that name. In fact, our month August is named after him.
Right. Augustus Caesar. Right.
Anyway, he so there was this incipient conflict between Augustus Caesar on the one hand, Mark Antony on the other, and Mark Antony allied with Cleopatra.
Okay.
Now, and what made it worse, as I've already said, is that Mark Antony was married to a Roman woman, already married, and if I'm not mistaken, I think she was the sister or a relative of Augustus Caesar. So his dalliance, well, it was more than a dalliance, his infatuation with Cleopatra was an insult apart from anything else, and it was considered dangerous to the empire, the Roman Empire. Hold on, I just need to, my throat is getting dry, so let me just take another drink.
Okay, no problem. And for those just joining us, we're speaking with Egyptian scholar Dr. Charles Finch, and we're talking about Queen Cleopatra VII, the last pharaoh, and there's been a conversation about Queen Cleopatra and her ethnicity, or what today people may call race, or being mixed race, however you want to frame it. Because of the documentary series from Jada Pinkett Smith, the installment that comes out May 10th dealing with Queen Cleopatra, and African-American actress Adele James is portraying Queen Cleopatra. You know, we talked about this on the African History Network show this past Sunday. Okay, go ahead, Dr. Finch.
Yeah, and let's get to that.
Okay, go ahead.
There's absolutely no doubt, and it makes me grit my teeth.
Okay.
And the main person in front of this is Zahi Hawass.
Oh, yes.
Who is the leader, the chairman of the Department of Antiquities. He's an Egyptian. Mm-hmm. And the one thing you can say about Cleopatra, on her paternal line, father's line, she was Macedonian, or Greek, if you will, right? But her mother was Egyptian, because the Ptolemies, I already mentioned the Ptolemies.
Right.
And the Ptolemies who were given Egypt, you might say, after Alexander died. And so there was a line of about 12 Ptolemies, something like that. And Cleopatra was in that line, mm-hmm. Through her father. But Cleopatra, what can I say? So the Ptolemies ruled for about 300 years after Alexander died. And the last Ptolemy would be Cleopatra herself. And she was just taking shall we say, the bull by the horns, if we could say that. Right. And she established herself as ruler over Egypt. In fact, she was ruthless. She got rid of her brother. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Took a minute, took a while, but she got rid of him. She could not tolerate anybody or anything that would stand in her way of absolute rule. And she had absolutely no qualms about seducing Caesar on the one hand, Mark Antony on the other. And for her, it was simplicity itself. She was a fascinating woman, fascinating. She had I don't know what else to say it. Fascinating, and she had the means to fascinate the men around her. Right. But let's get back to her ethnicity, and we'll continue. As I say, she was half Egyptian. What I mean, her mother was Egyptian. Her father was Macedonian. Now, as I say, there are Egyptians today who, like Zahi Hawass, yes, who is the director of the Department of Antiquities, who absolutely and totally, angrily reject any idea that Cleopatra was mixed race, because that's what it means, right, to say that her mother was Egyptian. The Egyptians, the native Egyptians, were basically descended from Africans. Mm-hmm. If you wanted to see who the ancient Egyptians look like, I'm not talking about the Arabs invaded Egypt in the 7th century A.D.
Right, 639.
Okay,
yep.
7th century A.D.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Zahi Hawass is trying to say that the ancestors of the Arabs were the rulers of Egypt.
Right.
No.
Right.
Absolutely not.
Right.
That is just an egregious lie. Okay. Now the history of ancient Egypt, of dynastic Egypt. Let's not say ancient Egypt. Dynastic Egypt goes back to 4000 BC. Mm-hmm. And why was Egypt called the two lands? That was one of their own names for themselves, because Egypt at one time had been, Upper Egypt was was southern Egypt. Lower Egypt was northern Egypt. Okay, and that's the reason why they called Egypt the two lands. They were united by the man who became the first identifiable pharaoh by the name of Menes. Right, and he united the two lands into the country that we historically came to know as Kemet, or Egypt. But that isn't when Egypt actually started. Okay. The ancient Egyptians, I'm just going to say what the ancient Egyptians said about their own country. Now, you can either take it or leave it alone, but this is what they said. They said their history went back to 55,000 BC. Wow. 50,000 years prior to the historical period. Now, you can accept or reject that. But that's what they said about their own country. Nonetheless, there's a book by Robert Bauval and Graham Hancock. Oh, yeah, I have the book. I don't want to stop what I'm saying to go get it. Okay. But the book is about the Sphinx. Now, what does the Sphinx have to do with any of this? Mm-hmm.
Here on my cat. Yeah.
The Sphinx sits in I don't want to call it a ditch, but a excavation. All right. Okay. It's excavation. And first of all, let me say this about the Sphinx, and then we'll keep going. Okay. The Sphinx nose that you see, if you went there today, Egypt, the nose has been blown off. Who blew the nose off? Napoleon. Okay. Why? Because it was, and I'm going to use this word with quotation marks. It was a fully Negroid nose. Mm-hmm. Couldn't tolerate it. He actually blew it off. And the nose that they blew off is sitting in the Louvre Museum in Paris today.
The nose that they blew off. Okay. Now,
yes.
Now let me ask a question. Now, so in Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization by Tony Browder, he cites sketches he talks about how the nose was deteriorating over maybe hundreds of years or something like that. So
say it again. Got distracted for just a second. Repeat what you just said.
Yeah. In Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization, Tony Browder talks about how he cites sketches of the Sphinx, and he talks about how the nose was deteriorating over time. Now, was it deteriorating? Was the nose deteriorating prior to Napoleon shooting the nose, or was the nose totally intact, not deteriorating, and it was Napoleon who solely destroyed the nose? Do you know?
I think that's that is a more accurate depiction of what actually happened.
Which one?
I think the nose, because if you go and see that, like I said, they didn't lose or get rid of the nose. The nose, you could actually, I don't think they show it, but it's sitting there in the Paris Museum, undisturbed.
Okay.
And unaffected. So, and like I said, why? He couldn't tolerate the idea that this was, again, a Negro. And I have to use that word so you know exactly what I mean. So there's no ambiguity of what I'm talking about when we're talking about the Sphinx.
Okay.
Now, wait a minute. I haven't even gotten to the best part.
Okay. Okay.
Hancock and Bauval actually started studying, they dug out, I won't call it a ditch, an excavation down about almost 6 feet, where they actually constructed the Sphinx in front of the second pyramid of Giza.
Okay.
But if you look at it, the way Hancock and Bobal did it, you see levels of clay going down from the top, from the surface of the ground, all the way down to the base of where the Sphinx sits, and you can see different levels of soil. I say clay, but soil and clay. And Hancock and Bobal says those you can date those levels. Okay, you can date those levels all the way down to the basic, to the to the foundation, all the way down to the base of the Sphinx. You know how far they go back?
How far?
10,000 years.
Wow. Okay.
I mean, so yeah, 10,000 years. So if the Sphinx is that old, because they had to excavate around the Sphinx, not around. They had to excavate to actually construct the Sphinx in the way that they did,
mm-hmm.
and that went 10,000 years. That's the reason why my new book is going to be called Nile Valley Civilization: A 10,000-Year History, because to have built the Sphinx, something like the Sphinx, would require a civilization equal to the task.
Okay, something like this.
Even if you just see pictures of the Sphinx, you know exactly the truth of that.
Right.
So the Sphinx. So I mean, what has been happening is that Egyptologists, it was a French linguist by the name of Champollion,
mm-hmm.
who went to Egypt and was the first European anyway to decipher the so-called hieroglyphics, the hieroglyphic language of the Egyptians, and launched Egyptology as a discipline.
Right.
And but what happened is that when they could read now the literature and the inscriptions in the Egyptian language, the inscriptions that were carved out of the walls, the papyri they could find, the clay tablets, they began to realize that this was a fantastic, fabulous civilization, which even up by 1820 had not been exceeded or excelled. Now the Greeks, people talk about the Greeks. I don't have any problem with the Greeks because the Greeks recognized the primacy of ancient Egypt and said so.
Right.
Especially Herodotus.
Right.
Herodotus says, "Don't tell me about what he was a Greek now. He himself was a Greek. He said, don't tell me about what the Greeks did. The Egyptians did it all first, and they're the ones that taught the Greeks."
Mm-hmm.
This is Herodotus talking.
Correct.
And because Herodotus is the so-called father of history.
Right.
Now, let's get back to Cleopatra for a minute. I'm sorry, I'm
okay.
Kind of jumping around a little bit. Cleopatra was far more, shall we say, proud, far more committed to her Egyptian ancestry through her mother than to her Ptolemaic one, through her father. Maybe I'm overstating that a little bit, but not by much.
Okay.
Because she, like I said, she considered herself an heir of the pharaohs. She considered herself basically an Egyptian pharaoh. Now, there had been 3 or 4 previous female pharaohs in Egyptian history, going all the way back to the first dynasty. Hatshepsut being one.
Right.
That's well known. And there have been a few others. There were 3 others. And Cleopatra considered herself in that same line. She didn't consider herself a mere queen. Mm-hmm. Now, by the way, there was brother-sister marriage among the royalty of ancient Egypt. I think she may have even married her brother so that she could put herself in a position of power. But sooner or later, he was gotten rid of.
Right.
Cleopatra was ruthless like that, but she's extremely dynamic, though. And as I said, she knew how to wrap, and men just kind of, she wrapped them around her little finger, as they said. And you know what happened when Augustus, as we know, it was Julius Caesar that came first.
Right.
And she wrapped him around her finger. Then Mark Antony came second. She wrapped him around her finger and destroyed his marriage. And then he eventually committed suicide because Augustus, the fleets of Augustus had defeated his fleets, his military arm, and he committed. And also Cleopatra had fled the field of battle, and he just became totally dispirited. And he wanted to go back to Egypt, literally. And this sounds melodramatic, but so he could die in the arms of Cleopatra, if you can imagine that.
Right.
Yeah, this seems all very, hokey and made up in Hollywood and movie, but it happened.
Yeah, it sounds like a movie, but yeah, it did. And he committed suicide. She committed suicide as well. She dies in 30 BC. So you mentioned her mother. Now, from some research on this, is believed her mother was Cleopatra V. Is that correct?
No, I don't think. No, I haven't seen that.
Okay.
All I've ever heard or seen is that her mother was Egyptian.
Okay.
And by the way, Zahi Hawass just rejects that.
Now,
not that he has any reason for objecting it, but he wants to remove all traces of Africa from at least from the dynastic line of ancient Egypt.
Okay. So let me.
Wait. There's one other thing I want to say. Then we can get to questions. One is when Augustus finally, he conquered the Mark Antony. Mark Antony committed suicide. Augustus came to Egypt to take over, the empire. But you know what he wouldn't do?
What?
He wouldn't look Cleopatra in the eye. Because by that time she had such a reputation that he was afraid of getting hypnotized by her.
Right.
If you can imagine that.
Right.
He would not look her in the eye. And it was after that encounter with Augustus that the famous story that Shakespeare and everybody else sort of repeated. She took an asp, which was a cobra. And she actually took it in her hand and had it sink its fangs into her. Can you imagine?
Right.
He had a flair for the dramatic, that's for sure. And she died that way.
Right, from a snake bite.
I'm sorry?
From a snake bite.
Yes, from the snake bite. And she's probably, a lot of people consider her the most fascinating woman in history. Well, you could argue, you could say yes or no, you could argue about that, but, she came real close to ruling Rome and the Roman Empire.
Right.
Through the two men that she just completely entranced. Julius Caesar on the one hand, Mark Antony on the other. And Augustus said, no, if I go back, Augustus came and took over the empire and defeated Mark Antony, and he committed suicide and all this. And Augustus knew better. When he finally confronted Cleopatra, he would not look her in the eye.
Right. So
he was afraid that she was going to mesmerize him, hypnotize him.
Absolutely. Okay.
What can I say?
So let me try to put a fine point on this, because I know we've run out of time, and I want you to talk about your new book as well. Okay. Now, you said that on her mother's side, you said her mother was Egyptian. Now, the period of time that we're talking about, first of all, the Greeks invade under Alexander the Greek in 332 BC, and they conquer in 323 BC. Okay. And now, Queen Cleopatra VII is born in 69 BC. Now, this is about 700 years before the Arab invasion that starts in 639 AD. Now, when you say that her mother was Egyptian, what at this point in time in 69 BC, after the you had the Persians invading, you had the Persians who already invaded, you had the Greeks who have invaded, and the Greeks have been there for a few hundred years. When we say Egyptian in 69 BC,
black, I know what you're getting at. No, still
Yes.
black, still black people.
Still black people.
They didn't stop being black people.
Okay.
So those people, those different conquerors, they came and they ruled at this. They ruled the empire or the country of Egypt. All right.
Mm-hmm.
But they didn't change who the people were.
Okay.
And in fact, each one of them would take an Egyptian wife and or concubine, shall we say.
Right.
But they didn't change who the people were. They remained black people right up until the time of the Arab invasion, which was, as you say, in the 7th century A.D.
Right.
When after that, and you already mentioned them. You're right. The Persians,
mm-hmm.
the Greek Macedonians, the Romans, and the Arabs finally. And the Arabs came in droves to Egypt. In droves.
And what I heard historically about the Ptolemies is that they would either marry or intermix with a black Egyptian woman.
Yep.
Okay.
The answer to that is absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely true. So, as I say, there is a strong mixed race, I guess the only way I can put it,
right.
element in Cleopatra's history. And as I say, her mother was an Egyptian. So yeah, when that picture of her that Jada Pinkett Smith is going to use, or the actress,
yes,
that's right. You don't listen to Zahi Hawass. Let him foam at the mouth about the fact that a black woman is representing Cleopatra. That's his issue. Now, I've been to Egypt, I think, a dozen times, and I've interacted and spoke with Egyptians,
mm-hmm.
Including a year and a half ago. Not all of them take that attitude that Zahi Hawass does.
Right.
In fact, especially since when so many of them, not so many of them, but a number of them have been the guides for tour guides that were led by people like Asa Hilliard
mm-hmm.
and others who schooled them. Said, look, taught them John Henry Clark, even Doc Ben Yochanan. And they once they were schooled, they accepted it. They weren't like, but Zahi Hawass is just, he lost his mind.
Right, and he
just can't take it. He for whatever reason, he cannot accept that historical reality.
Right.
What is it? What do you do? There's nothing you can do but somebody like him. But of course, now he is the one who is in charge of Egyptian antiquities.
Well, he just he I think he just resigned from that position or something. He is not in that position anymore. He's about to go on a tour in the U.S.
right.
starting in May
of the United States.
Yeah.
Of America. Now, here's what I would like to see happen. I don't know if it will or not.
Mm-hmm.
I would like there be a large, solid contingent of black people to attend every one of his lectures and presentations in every city where he goes. Now, will that happen? I don't know.
Right.
And when he starts talking what he talks, then he needs to be challenged.
Mm-hmm.
He needs to be challenged. Yes, I know about that upcoming tour.
Right.
I don't know if he's coming to Atlanta or not, but he's making I think he's supposed to be here for at least 3 weeks.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken. But we'll now what'll happen. I'm going to ask my friend. You already mentioned Tony Browder. You call him Tony Browder. I call him Anthony Karakamoon Browder. As you know, he was one of the co-excavators of the temple tomb of Karakamoon,
exactly,
from the 25th dynasty. So I actually gave him that name. And when I talk to him, I say Karak.
Yeah, I have his book also, dealing with finding Karakamoon. I have his book as well. So
yeah,
let me ask you this question. So in the article from Variety.com written by Tina Garabi. Tina Garabi is the director of this installment of African Queens from executive producer Jada Pinkett Smith that deals with Cleopatra VII. And in the article, she says, what the historians can confirm is that it is more likely that Cleopatra looked like Adele James, actress Adele James, African-American actress Adele James, than Elizabeth Taylor ever did.
Yep.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Now,
and
go ahead.
Go ahead.
Go ahead and finish.
No. let's not even talk about the movie. Have you ever seen the movie Ten Commandments?
Unfortunately, yes.
Yes, I've seen it. I've seen it since it was first came out when I was but a lad. I've seen it about 3 times.
Right.
The Egyptians didn't look like anyone in that movie.
Right.
Charlton Heston, Yul Brynner. There was nobody that, in terms of their physical characteristics, looked like what the Egyptians would have looked like in the time of Moses. That would have been, 1300 BC, a little earlier.
Right.
There was nobody in Egypt that looked like that. But, this is Hollywood.
Exactly.
Now, I don't know why, we don't have to get off into that too much.
Right.
But there's been a systematic attempt. Once they, like I said, when they began to realize just what Egypt had accomplished, there was a concerted effort to de-Africanize ancient Egypt.
Yes.
Still going on.
Yes.
Still going on.
Yes. So further in the article, and there's one other quick article I want to just highlight that just came out Thursday also, and then I want you to talk about your book, and we're going to give you a website address as well. So further in the article, Tina Garabi says, so was Cleopatra black? We don't know for sure, but we can be certain she wasn't white like Elizabeth Taylor. She says, we need to have a conversation with ourselves about our colorism and the internalized white supremacy that Hollywood has indoctrinated us with. Because in the article, she talks about how Cleopatra being portrayed white somehow for some people increases her value or increases her worth. Whereas portraying her as a melanated person who has some like black African ancestry somehow cheapens her worth, lessens her worth.
Yeah, I mean, you see, I used to foam at the mouth with this kind of stuff. I used to grit my teeth and foam at the mouth and get angry and wanting to hurt people, whatnot. When you would hear stuff like that. I'm at the age now, but what I do is laugh at them.
Right.
I laugh at these people. I laugh at the ideas. I laugh at what they're trying to say.
Exactly.
No. Cleopatra didn't look anything like Elizabeth Taylor. Nothing. And Moses didn't look like anything like Charlton Heston.
Right.
And Ramesses II didn't look like Yul Brynner.
Right.
Jeez.
Right. Exactly. And this is propaganda from the media. Why? So in talking to you and coming up with the title for this interview, you referred to Queen Cleopatra as the last pharaoh. Okay.
Yeah.
And some people who I guess think they know about African history but really don't said, oh, she wasn't a pharaoh, or the last pharaoh was 600 years before that. What happened? Why do you refer to Cleopatra as the last pharaoh?
Because that's how she thought of herself, and that's what she called herself, and that's in effect, she did have Egyptian ancestry. Yes. So she wasn't just a Ptolemaic Macedonian.
Right.
She kept, and even the Ptolemies got so that they de-emphasized their Macedonian ancestry and increasingly Egyptianized themselves and married into the local populace, as we've already seen.
Right.
So they considered themselves, they wanted to rule in the line of the pharaohs. They weren't trying to be Macedonian kings. They wanted to be thought of, they wanted to live like and be thought of as pharaohs. And Cleopatra was no different. She was, as far as she was concerned, she was an Egyptian. And therefore, she was a pharaoh. She was a pharaoh, and she was either the 4th or 5th female pharaoh in Egyptian history, because there had been women pharaohs in Egyptian history.
Right. Exactly.
Early, going all the way back to the first, the earlier dynasties.
Yes. Okay. And then lastly, there was this article that just came out Thursday, April 28th. And NBC News has this article. Zahi Hawass is quoted in it, of course. Now, this one, this contains a statement from the Egyptian Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities. But the name of this article is "Cleopatra Was Not Black. Egypt Tells Netflix in Growing Feud Ahead of New Series." Okay. And I just want to highlight something here, because it's important for us to have scholars like you and others that push back on nonsense like this. Okay. In this article here, let me bring it back up here. Just seconds. I have it on the screen. Okay. So it says that Queen Cleopatra, which is released May 10th, features Adele James in the lead role, a casting decision that the streaming giant Netflix says is, quote, a nod to the centuries-long conversation about the ruler's race, end quote, but which officials in Cairo have dismissed as, quote, blatant historical fallacy, end quote, blatant historical fallacy. The government stated, the government statement from Cairo, the government statement issued Thursday marked an escalation in a feud that has sparked demands for the show's cancellation amid a broader debate over representation in popular culture. So they go on to cite the Egypt's Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities, argued that the documentary nature of the feature, quote, requires those in charge of its production to investigate accuracy and rely on historical and scientific facts, end quote. They quote Dr. Mustafa Waziri, Secretary General of the Supreme Council of Antiquities, said in the statement that Cleopatra's appearance in the show was, quote, a falsification of Egyptian history and a blatant historical fallacy, end quote. I know you've hit on it before, but for those just tuning in now, how would you respond to that?
Besides getting mad,
yes.
Angry, ready to go. I love to go face to face and chin to chin with any of these people. It reminds me of the situation of the Cairo Symposium in 1970. Yeah, that's right, 1974, when Sheikh Anta Diop, not Diop, Diop, and Teofilo Benga,
yes,
faced off against a phalanx of European and Egyptologists,
yes,
about just this very issue. And after this debate was concluded, the moderator debate says, well, only Doctors Diop and Obenga came to this discussion, this debate, prepared to make their case that the ancient Egyptians were an black African race, and they won the day. Now, this is 1974, and they were up against Europeans and Arabs who were trying to remove all trace of Africa from the ancient Egyptians. Can you imagine? They'd been in Africa for thousands of years, and they were trying to de-Africanize Egypt. Still are. And I would love to renew that debate.
Yes.
I would love to do that.
We need to.
And so would Browder, huh?
Yeah, we need to. Now, your website is charlessfinch.com, charlessfinch.com. And we'll bring your website here up on the screen. Tell people about your latest book.
Okay. Excuse me. My latest book, I'm looking at it right now, Nile Valley Civilization, a 10,000-year history. A history of ancient Kemet from the point of view with a complete, shall we say, rooting it where it's supposed to be rooted, in Africa.
Yes.
Not just geographically, but racially, ethnically, culturally, in every central way. The ancient Egyptians, you know what the ancient Egyptians' name for their country was?
Well, one was Kemet, and another was Tameri.
Okay, Kemet.
Yes.
And you know what Kemet meant?
Land
it meant literally the Black Land.
The Black Land.
Of course, now what do your Egyptologists say? Oh, that's just a reference to the black soil. Except for one thing. they had a name for themselves, the Egyptians. You know what they called themselves? Kemiyu, which means literally the blacks.
Yes.
So, like I said, up until the 19th century, nobody ever questioned the African origins of ancient Egypt. Okay. That was never an issue
up until the 1800s.
And it was created by so-called scholars in Europe.
Yes.
And later on, among the Arabs, to de-Africanize ancient Egypt. Boy, they really are obsessed with de-Africanizing ancient Egypt, taking the black out of ancient Egypt,
right?
Except as quote as slaves. Now, if you want to see, I don't know, have you ever been to Egypt yourself?
Not yet.
Oh boy, when you do,
yes,
make sure you go down to Aswan.
Okay.
Where the dam is.
Okay.
There you will see the Nubians.
Yes.
That's who's there. The Nubians. They got put. They were the original part of the original population of ancient Egypt that got pushed south.
Correct.
By the Arabs, but they have taken their stand, so to speak, right there at Aswan.
Right.
And those people, once you see them, I said those people are the remnants. I don't know. Can I use that term? Mm-hmm. Are the continuation of the ancient Egyptians. That's who the ancient Egyptians look like, and that's who they were.
Right.
Nubia was derived from the ancient Egyptian word nub, which meant gold, right. Because gold came from the south, and so the people and was funneled into Egypt by the people we today call the Nubians, and that's what the Egyptians called them, the Nubians.
Now was okay. I'm going to come back to Nubia in just a second. I know you have to run, so we're going to let you go here in just a minute. But Kemet, the translation for Kemet. Now you said that means land of the blacks or the black land. Which
yeah, the land of the black and the black land. That's Kemet. Yes.
Okay, and but the black land. So land of the blacks, because I know Browder talks about this in Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization. He says it means the land of the blacks, but it's in reference to the complexion of the people, not the dark soil.
No, okay. This is where the controversy comes in.
Okay. Because
there are those who say it's a reference to both. But even if you say, okay, it just refers to the black land and the black land only.
Okay.
And this is what I said earlier. Mm-hmm. But the ancient Egyptians called themselves Kemiyu, which does mean literally the blacks.
The blacks, okay. And
they call themselves the black people.
Mm-hmm. In reference to their complexion.
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay. You said now Nubia. Now, from my understanding, isn't Nubia derived from a Greek word?
That's not. Geez, let me see. Nubia, Greek word. Huh. I'd have to look up.
Okay, just like
I don't know that I don't know that I can't. I don't know that it's Greek.
Okay, just like Ethiopia is.
Okay. Let's just say this. Mm-hmm. I'm not thinking straight. It is true. The ancient Egyptians didn't refer to Nubia as Nubia.
Right.
They referred to Nubia as Kush.
Yeah. Okay.
And Kush was the name of the also was the name of the northern third of the Sudan. Mm-hmm. And Kush and Egypt were partnered ethnically and geographically and often politically, because even what the Egyptians say about where they came from. They said they came from Horus, and brought his followers. This is what the Egyptians say: brought his followers to Egypt from the south.
Right.
This is what the Egyptians say.
Right.
The followers of Horus came from the south.
Right.
And remember, south in Egyptian language was up. Mm-hmm. North was down or back.
Right.
Hindquarters.
Now, why is that?
Whereas the head was always south. So you always faced south.
Right.
As when you were looking toward this is opposite of the way we look at it today. And the south was always first, chief, and up.
Now, why was south up and north down?
Because that's where they came from.
Well,
that's where they came from.
But also the Nile River flows from south to north.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. That's the point. You're absolutely right. That's even a stronger point that I should have made myself.
No, it's okay.
Because the Nile River started in the so-called Great Lakes and flowed from south to north. Mm-hmm. Right. And the Blue Nile, let me get this right now, the Blue Nile joined, because the Blue Nile flowed from Ethiopia north into Egypt. And they joined the White Nile from what is now Tanzania at Khartoum in the Sudan, and then flowed north as a single river.
Okay. All right. Visit his website, Charles S. Finch, FINCH.com, CharlesSFinch.com. There's a wealth of information there. Pre-order his new book. This deals with Nile Valley civilization, a 10,000 year history, and much of what has been written about African history and culture. Much has been written about African history and culture, and yet one will comb the vast literature nearly in vain for a complete and comprehensive survey of African civilizations by a single author. The multi-volume UNESCO General History of Africa 1 is in effect an anthology, and while valuable and wide-ranging, suffers the limitations that all works of collective authorship do. Okay, so this is a fantastic new book. Tony Browder mentioned it last week when I had him on the show, and I said, well, we got to get Dr. Charles Finch on this week. So visit his website to pre-order this book now, Nile Valley Civilization, a 10,000 year history. How can people get in contact with you, Dr. Finch, if people want to bring you in to do lectures or teach classes or anything like that? How can people contact you?
I'm trying to do less and less of that. I don't like traveling as much as I do anymore, but they should do it the way you did it.
Okay.
Email is probably the best way.
Okay. And they can email you through the website.
That's the way
they
I
can
prefer.
Contact you through your website. They can contact you through your website also, right?
Yeah, that's another way.
Okay.
Email or website. My email is charlessfinch@gmail.com. Charles, the one word, lowercase, charlessfinch@gmail.com.
All right. Well, look, brother, I know you have to run. Thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule. And we worked through the technical difficulties. First, we had you on.
We finally did, yeah.
Via the internet, and we could see you, but then the internet was acting up. So then he said, hey, can we do this by phone? So I said, okay, yeah, I'll call you through Skype. It's technology. We have to understand how to navigate this technology to get the information out, brother, by any means necessary. All right. Well,
I heard that.
You have a great day, man, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, brother. Hold tight.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay.
All right, peace. All right, everybody. That was Dr. Charles Finch. And thanks for joining us today. We're going to be here for a little while longer because I teach my online history class today, Saturdays, 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So don't go anywhere. We have more information for you. If you like this type of information that we provide at the African History Network, you can support us, $ the AHN Show through Cash App, $ the AHN Show through Cash App. Also through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN Show. Visit our website, theafricanhistorynetwork.com, theafricanhistorynetwork.com. This helps us keep doing the research, stay on the air, keep broadcasting, finance the Sunday night show, the African History Network show that I broadcast on 9:10 a.m. Superstation WFDF. I've been broadcasting the African History Network show for 13 years. 7 years on 9:10 a.m. WFDF. So we're on Sundays, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Here's our PayPal, Cash App information right here on the homepage of our website. So if you want to support us, $10, $15, $25, $50, $100, whatever it is, it definitely helps. You can click right here for the Cash App link as well as the PayPal link. This is our official Cash App account, $ the AHN Show. And when you go to it, it'll say Michael and show my picture there. These other ones are fake African History Network Cash App accounts. There are 5 that I have identified that have been stealing money from us, fake African History Network Cash App accounts. Our tag is, our Cash App tag is $ the AHN show, SHOW. If you type it in, make sure you type in the full tag, because these other fake ones will show up before you type in, you know, the HOW. Okay, so that's why I put it right here and put our actual link here. I've contacted Cash App. They've opened an investigation. They're slow as Heinz ketchup. And it was last year that I opened up this investigation. I'm still trying to follow up on them. On Saturdays, I teach ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. It's a 12-week online history course. We deal with thousands of years of history and what leads up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. Okay, I do a PowerPoint presentation. We have book references, articles, video clips. So you can register for the class right now. As soon as you register, there's you'll be able to join us for the day's class, and you can go back and watch the previous classes also. Okay, so we deal with history, thousands of years of history, look at what leads up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place, and also we look at, we go through and analyze the transatlantic slave trade. We look at the 800-year occupation of Europe by the Africans known as the Moors as well. Okay, so in this class, Saturday, April 29th. Then on the class is on sale $60, regularly $130. On Sundays, I teach Black resistance movements from the Haitian Revolution, U.S. Civil War, Civil Rights Movement, and Black Power Movement, 1800 to 1968. We go through and look at history chronologically. This class will be on Saturday, April 30th, 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Okay. We have a bundle pack. You can register for both of these classes for only $100. You can use this information with your children as well. I would say the information is PG-13. So it's not overly graphic. We won't do a lot of cursing or anything like that. It's not crazy like that. Okay. So you can register for the class, and there'll be 5 of my lectures in the video library in digital format, so you get a bonus of 5 of my lectures also. Now, it took me, I've been teaching this class on and off for 7 years, and I started teaching it back in 2017. I've studied history 31 years. You see me on Roland Martin Unfiltered. You see me on Faraji Muhammad Show, The Culture. Many of you all watch the African History Network show and been following us for years, even when I was on Blog Talk Radio. So with this class, this evolved out of a lecture that I did in January 2014 called Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. And that was about 7 years of research. That it was a 4.5-hour lecture. But we can't start studying our history in slavery, even with transatlantic slave trade, which is important to study. We can't start in 1619 or in the 1440s when the Portuguese get involved. In 1441 with Anton Gonzalez. We have to understand the history chronologically and deal with the 800-year occupation of Europe by the Africans known as the Moors, who enter into the Iberian Peninsula, today known as Spain and Portugal, in 711 AD. Now, this course not only deals with the transatlantic slave trade, but it also deals with the thousands of years of history that leads up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. August 20th, 2019 marked the 400th year anniversary of the 20 and odd Africans who came into Point Comfort in Virginia on August 20th, 1619 on the White Lion pirate ship, in what would later be called the colony of Virginia. Now, this year of 2019 was known as the year of return, as many African Americans were reconnecting to Africa, especially West Africa, and traveling to Ghana and other West African countries. When we discuss the transatlantic slave trade, we have to first understand that African people are the original people of North, Central, and South America, and have been in the land we call the United States of America at least 51,700 years ago. Now, last week when we spoke with Tony Browder, author of Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization, and he's also the author of Egypt on the Potomac and finding Karakorum. You know, he talked about the Olmecs and Olmec culture as well. And we talked about the African origins, the African root of Olmec culture coming from ancient Kemet. We've interviewed Dr. David Imhotep numerous times, and these are actual slides from the class, by the way. I put together the whole curriculum. There's about 80 to 100 articles that we reference in this class. There's 7 books that we use as reference. You don't have to buy any of the books. We show you excerpts of the book on the screen, okay? But Dr. David Imhotep's book, The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence, it came out in 2011. On page 14 of his book, he deals with a discovery made in Allendale County, South Carolina in 2004 by Dr. Albert Goodyear. Evidence of a African presence 51,700 years ago in Allendale County, South Carolina. Okay. And people are asking for my email address. You can email me right through the website. Go to theafricanhistorynetwork.com, theafricanhistorynetwork.com, and you can email me right through the website. Also, when we have the website up here on the screen, and then also you can email me as well at ahnshow@theafricanhistorynetwork.com, ahnshow@theafricanhistorynetwork.com. Okay. All right. Now, they found, Dr. Albert Goodyear is an archaeologist at the University of South Carolina. They found 13 different types of evidence to thoroughly document an African presence in the land that we call the United States of America, going back at least 51,700 years ago. They found artifacts, architecture, campsites, carvings, Egyptian writings, footprints in lava, genetic M174D haploid groups dealing with DNA and genetics, linguistics, paintings, skulls, skeletons, structures, and tools. Okay, they found 13 different types of evidence, thoroughly documenting an African presence in this country that we call the United States of America, going back at least 51,700 years ago. Okay, so it's totally ridiculous for people to think, especially for African Americans to think, that African people first came to this land as slaves, conquered and shackled by Europeans. Okay, that's a total misunderstanding of history. Now, this is a picture of Dr. Albert Goodyear. He's a white archaeologist. This is an article from ScienceDaily.com, that came out in November 18th, 2004. The article is about 19 years old. It's still at ScienceDaily.com. You can go back and read it. It's called New Evidence Puts Man in North America 50,000 Years Ago. New evidence puts man in North America 50,000 years ago. Here's a summary of what the article says. Now, this is not my summary. This is the summary coming from ScienceDaily.com. Radiocarbon tests of carbonized plant remains, where artifacts were unearthed last May along the Savannah River in Allendale County by University of South Carolina archaeologist Dr. Albert Goodyear, indicate that the sediments containing these artifacts are at least 50,000 years old. Meaning that humans inhabited North America long before the last ice age. Okay, so we have to ask the question, well, who were these humans? Okay, who was on Earth 50,000 years ago, 51,000 years ago? Okay, these were the Khoisan. The Khoisan have the oldest DNA on the planet. They're the ancestors to the Ainu and the Twa. They go all around the world. And they were also here in the land we call the United States of America. Now, in October 2012, genetic study published in Science magazine found that the Khoisan in Southern Africa, are the oldest ethnic group of modern humans, with their ancestral line originating about 100,000 years ago. The Khoisan, formerly called by the derogatory term Bushmen, are genetically unique, and no other currently known population had separated so early from our common modern human ancestor, according to the report. Now, here are a couple of Khoisan women. The Khoisan are the short-statured Africans, okay? The Khoisan live mainly in southern Africa in territories spanning Botswana, Namibia, Angola, Zambia, Zimbabwe, and South Africa. They are largely divided into two groups, hunters and gatherers, known as the Sans people, and keepers of the livestock, known as the Khoikhoi people. The Khoisan languages include the distinctive click sounds, that are not found in the languages of their neighbors. Okay, AtlantaBlackStar.com has a good article entitled 5 Ethnic Groups That Prove the First Humans Were Black. Okay, and some of you will have seen the interview from April 17, 2014, where I interviewed my friend Runoko Rashidi, and we were talking about Chevalier, Joseph Boulogne, and the Moors and the Black Madonnas in Europe. And we're rebroadcasting that interview as well, because the movie Chevalier is out that talks about Joseph Boulogne, who is also known as the Black Mozart. Okay, and he was born in Guadeloupe. He was half French and half African. But the interview I did, in that interview with Runoko Rashidi, he talks about articles that he was writing for AtlantaBlackStar.com. All right, now, how's everybody doing today? Give us a thumbs up, give us a heart, give us a like on this broadcast. Be sure to register for this online class. And we have the bundle pack on the homepage of our website, theafricanhistorynetwork.com, theafricanhistorynetwork.com, for the online classes. So you get both online classes and you get bonus content as well. It's only $100. It's a $300 value. Even after the course is over with, you'll still have full access. You can go back and watch the entire course, okay? Or you can watch it as much as you want to. All right, so we look at different archaeological discoveries that have come out in the last 15 to 20 years. There was a big discovery that came out in 2010, found on the Greek island of Crete. And they found stone tools that date back at least 130,000 years ago. Okay, stone tools on the Greek island of Crete. Over the course of 2 summers, archaeologists say are at least 130,000 years old, which is considered strong evidence for the earliest known seafaring in the Mediterranean, and calls for rethinking the maritime capabilities of pre-human cultures. Okay, so we go through and look at discoveries like Tanis Heraklion, the lost city of Egypt. And there are at least 2 lost cities of Egypt. You have Tanis Heraklion, but you also have Dazzling Aten. And Dazzling Aten was revealed in like the last couple of years. This article from yahoonews.com, sunken Egyptian city reveals 1,200-year-old secrets. Okay, so the British publication, The Telegraph, reports that 150 feet beneath the surface of Egypt's Bay of Abu Qir, they found 64 ships, 16-foot tall statues, 700 anchors, countless gold coins, and smaller artifacts. Archaeologist Frank Gaudillo estimates that Tanis Heraklion was built around 8th century BC, Okay, so you're talking about more than 700 years before Cleopatra VII was born. Now, these are some of the artifacts that were found at the bottom of the sea. All right. We look at different archaeological discoveries, and when these new discoveries come out, they're causing the scientists, the archaeologists, and the paleontologists to push the timelines back. And we keep finding out that based upon archaeology, we're much older than we've been told, and Homo sapiens are older than we've been told. So Runoko Rashidi, Dr. Charles Finch, and other African-centered scholars have been saying that African people, or Homo sapiens, modern man, are not 75,000 to 100,000 years old, but at least 300,000 years old. This article from NBCnews.com came out June 17, 2017, we're older than we thought. New find pushes human origin back 100,000 years. Okay, we're older than we thought. New find pushes human origin back 100,000 years. So an excerpt from the article says that in all the news outlets picked up this story. They all have New York Times, Washington Post, NBC, CBS, ABC, Associated Press, Time Magazine, National Geographic. They all have articles on this. Modern humans evolved much earlier than previously thought. Researchers reported new discoveries at a rich site in Morocco show modern humans were hunting and probably cooking game animals. 300,000 years ago, which is 100,000 years earlier than what scientists have believed up until now. 100,000 years earlier than what scientists have believed up until now. Now, new discoveries and new dating methods show that, in fact, many of the bones belong to modern Homo sapiens, and they lived as far back as 300,000 or 350,000 years ago. The earliest previous Homo sapiens bones date back 195,000 years ago, and they're from clear across the continent in modern-day Ethiopia. All right, so taken together, the findings show modern humans were dispersed across Africa long before anyone ever thought. And not only were we migrating from the Nile Valley region of Africa into Central Africa and West Africa much earlier than people thought, but we were migrating out of Africa and around the world much earlier than many people thought as well. Okay, so we go through and look at a number of archaeological discoveries. We look at the ancient African presence in Asia and in Europe, the African presence in Europe and things of this nature. African people were the first Asians. The earliest modern human Homo sapiens population of Asia were also of African birth. We're speaking of the diminutive Africoids, the short-statured Africans, the extremely important and much romanticized family of Black people phenotypically characterized by unusually short statures, skin complexions that range from yellowish to dark brown, tightly curled hair, and in frequent cases, like many other Blacks or Africans, stetophagia, which means deposits of fat around the buttocks, or what we would look at as large buttocks, like Sarah Bartman or Sarta J. Bartman, okay, who was a Khoikhoi, okay, and we know in the 1800s she was put on display in Europe, okay, and then she's going to become a prostitute. She lived a horrible life, but this is Europeans fascinated with the bodies of African people and African people's sexuality and dehumanizing us at the same time. So they are probably more, these short-statured Africans, these diminutive Africoids, are probably more familiar to us by such pejorative or negative terms as pygmies, negritos, and negrilos. Similar peoples who live today in Southern Africa have been titled Bushmen. More accurate names for these latter people are the San people, translated as original inhabitants. Okay, all right. So we go through and look at this history. We look at the Olmecs as well, and we deal with also the connection between Olmec culture and the new Black Panther movie, Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, that brought in the Latino angle with making Prince Namor Latino, and it dealt with the Spanish colonization of Mexico as well, because Prince Namor is 500 years old, and there's a scene where he goes back to when he was a child, and you see the Spanish colonizers conquering his people and enslaving them. Okay, so we go through and we also because Black Panther, the first movie and second movie deals with a lot of African culture and African history as well. Mandinka Egyptian Olmec connection. So this comes from page 82 of The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence by Dr. David Imhotep. We talked about this last week when I interviewed Tony Browder. A major ethnic group among the ancient Egyptian Nubians were the Manding people, M-A-N-D-I-N-G, or the Mandinka, an original Niger-Congo homeland in the general vicinity of the upper Nile Valley is probably as good a hypothesis as any for the origin of the Manding. The Proto-Manding migration had to have taken place during the African Aqualithic. Okay, now he goes on to say, when the Manding reached Central America and began mixing with the local population, they were labeled Olmecs. When these Africans reached Central America and began mixing with the local population, they were labeled Olmecs. The Olmecs were supposedly a mixture of the Manding or the Mandinka and American Indians or Amerins, A-M-E-R-I-N-D-S. Do not forget that the Manding or Mandinka make up the base of the Olmecs. So the Egyptians, the ancient Kemetic people, the Kemiyu, the Egyptians, the Manding, and the base of the Olmecs are related to each other. This is from page 82 of The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence by Dr. David Imhotep. So we go through, look at history. We look at this history chronologically as much as possible. We talk about the Druids. We deal with the Greeks and Romans conquering ancient Kemet. And the Druids are dealing with a watered down version of the teachings coming out of ancient Kemet, coming out of ancient Egypt. Okay. And we're going to see the Druids go into Ireland and take this information into Ireland as well. And this is who a British slave named Patrick is fighting against and killing when Pope Celestine I sends Patrick into Ireland in 432 Common Era AD to convert the Irish population to Christianity. And standing in the way of that are the Druids, who are dealing with the gnosis or the true knowledge, and they're dealing with a watered down version of teachings coming out of ancient Kemet, coming out of ancient Egypt. And he is killing the Druids, and the Druids wear a helmet similar to the helmets worn by or the headdress of Nasubitis or pharaohs in ancient Kemet, and they have an asp on them or a cobra, a snake. Okay, so they were referred to as the snake people. And when we hear the mythology of Patrick driving the snakes out of Ireland, first of all, Ireland is a cold climate, and it's an island, and there's no evidence, there's no archaeological evidence, there's no evidence whatsoever of snakes being in Ireland. So when we talk about Patrick driving the snakes out of Ireland, they were talking about the snake people who were called Druids. That's who this is, a metaphor. It's talking about symbolically. There were no snakes in Ireland. They're talking about him driving the Druids out, who were dealing with a watered down version of the teachings coming out of ancient Kemet, ancient Egypt, and then forcing Christianity upon the people. So we deal with the 800-year occupation of Europe by the Africans known as the Moors, who are taking the teachings from the Nile Valley region of Africa into Europe, and this brings Europe out of the Dark Ages. They're taking the science and the mathematics and the art and the chemistry, the periodic tables, the medicine, the surgical instruments, all this knowledge they're taking into Europe, and they're Africanizing Europe to varying degrees. And they're also intermixing into the European population, intermixing into the European bloodline as well. We know they lose their last control of the last stronghold of Granada, January 2nd, 1492, in the Spanish Granada Wars. And Christopher Columbus is going to set sail August 3rd, 1492. Okay, we look at things like the Tekken, which is a symbol of ancient, a symbol of resurrection coming from the story of Asar, Aset, and Heru, who the Greeks called Osiris, Isis, and Horus, okay, known as the First Holy Trinity. Now, some of this information may go outside of the circumference of your own awareness. Just because you disagree with it or don't like it does not mean it's not true. It just means you have to do some research to understand what I'm talking about. Now, there were approximately 1,200 Tekhenu built in ancient Kemet, but only about a dozen are found in Egypt today. Many of the Tekhenu removed from Egypt are now in Istanbul, Turkey, London, France, England, London, England, Paris, France, Berlin, Germany, New York, Rome, Italy, Vatican City, and elsewhere throughout the world. The Tekhenu for plural, the Tekhenu are now called obelisks by their new owners, and few know their origin or that they symbolize the resurrection of the African king Asar. So if you read Egypt on the Potomac by Tony Browder, page 17, and this is one of the books we use in the class also, Browder deals with this type of information. Now, once again, you don't have to buy any of these books to follow along in class, but we use the books for reference to document what we're talking about. And I show you excerpts of the book on the screen usually. All right, now, when we look at Freemasonry, the word Mason is derived from the Latin words mass and sun. Mason means child of light and expresses the desire to pursue light, which is a metaphor for the sun, which symbolizes knowledge. The term child of light or sons and daughters of light, which was first used to identify students who had completed 42 years of study in the temples of ancient Kemet. Many Masonic temples were modeled after the temples of ancient Kemet, places where light or knowledge was imparted in a series of steps or degrees. So the concept of going to a institution of higher learning and getting your credentials in a series of degrees, okay, associate's degree, bachelor's degree, master's degree, PhD, etc. That concept comes straight out of ancient Kemet, ancient Egypt. Okay, Kemet meaning land of the blacks. That comes out of the Nile Valley region of Africa. All right, now read pages 18 and 32 of Egypt on the Potomac by Tony Browder. So we go through and look at this history. We deal with the Black Madonnas and child coming from the story of Asar, Aset, and Heru being born of a virgin birth on December 25th. And then the decolorized version of that story, and we see the white Mary and Jesus. We look at different Neteru, the forces of nature, the deities in ancient Kemet as well, like Ma'at. We go through and look at some of the history of the Moors. We look at why Christmas is celebrated on December 25th, and that deals with astronomy. We deal with the film Black Panther. The Panther deity Bast comes from Bastet, which is a neter coming out of ancient Kemet. And Bastet was an ancient Egyptian goddess worshipped in the form of a lioness and later a cat. She was a goddess of warfare in Lower Kemet, worshipped as early as about 2890 BC during the Second Dynasty. Okay. We deal with things like what the word Wakanda means. Wakanda is a real word. Wakanda basically means possesses secret powers. We see some different spellings of it. But in Wisconsin, there is a Wakanda Water Park in Wisconsin. It's been there for years. There are schools named Wakanda, like in Nebraska. Okay. And we see Wakanda is Omaha Ponca, Sioux Indian, and Omaha Ponca and Sioux Indian Native American word that basically means possesses secret powers. We go through and look at different some ancient civilizations. We look at Hannibal Barca, and we look at Carthage, the Carthaginians, who were descendants of the Phoenicians. And we know Carthage is destroyed in 146 BC, founded in about 813 BCE, destroyed in 146 BCE by Rome. Okay, so we look at the Punic Wars. We deal with why Africa was not named after Publius Cornelius Scipio Africanus. Africa we consult Cassell's Latin English Dictionary 2002 edition, page 11, in the entry for a fear. It tells you that Africa means of Africa or belonging to Africa. Publius Cornelius Scipio takes his surname Africanus. He takes that name after he defeats Hannibal Barca at the Battle of Zama in 202 BC. So we deal with, the Battle of Cannae, 216 BC. We deal with Hannibal crossing the Alps in 219 BC, but also talk about the Battle of Zama in 202 BC. And then we know Rome is going to conquer Carthage in 146 BC, and Carthage is in the area of North Africa that today Tunisia is. Okay, we talk about ancient Nubia as well, and we look at some of these different African empires that Europe tried to claim as their own. They try to say these were Europeans, these were not African people, these were not Black African people, the same way they're doing with Egypt, the same way they're even doing with Queen Cleopatra, and she was not Nubian, she was not full-blooded African, but she had some African ancestry, as Dr. Charles Finch just explained. Ancient Nubia, or Ta-Nehesi, also known as Kush, as he talked about, and Kush is more of looked at as a region as opposed to, say, a country. But ancient Nubia, also known as Kush, Kush, was a region along the Nile River located in northern Sudan, where the conflict is going on now, northern Sudan and southern Egypt. So the southern portion of what makes up Egypt today, and the upper portion of Sudan in ancient times, that was Nubia. Now, it was home to some of Africa's earliest kingdoms, known for rich deposits of gold. Nubia was a major trading port for luxury goods that came from sub-Saharan Africa, such as incense, ivory, and ebony. Incense, ivory, and ebony. The first monarchy of recorded history was established in ancient Nubia. The Nubians were also known for their exceptional archery skills that provided the military strength for their rulers. Kings of Nubia, or Nasubites, or pharaohs, ultimately conquered and ruled Egypt for about a century, about 100 years. Monuments still stand in modern Egypt and Sudan at the sites where Nubian rulers built cities, temples, and royal pyramids. Okay, so we go through and look at history like that. Then we look at the history of the Moors, going into the Iberian Peninsula, today known as Spain and Portugal. They go through from Morocco into the Iberian Peninsula, today known as Spain and Portugal. They defeat the Vandals and the Visigoths. They settle in southern Spain and refer to it as Al-Andalus, which basically means to walk in the spiritual path or walk in the spiritual light. So who were the Moors? The Moors' ancestors were known as the Garamantes, Garamantes, the Garamantes. These were a Black African people living throughout North Africa. Hannibal Barca was Garamantes, as well as St. Augustine. Now, George G.M. James, in the book Stolen Legacy, said that the Moors were the custodians of the ancient Egyptian mystery system. These teachings are going to bring Europe out of the Dark Ages. And we know that the word Moors derived from the Greek word maros, M-A-U-R-O-S, maros, which literally means black or a very dark color. Now, the Romans adopted this word and called them Mari, M-A-U-R-I. The Mari were a Northwest African people who were very dark-skinned. The Romans will refer to the region of Northwest Africa as Mauritania. Mauritania is Latin and means the land of the black-skinned people. You'll also see the word Marish, M-A-U-R-I-S-H. Now, Romans later adopt the word as a reference for the black-skinned inhabitants they encountered in Africa. Read pages 527 and 187 in Golden Age of the Moor, edited by Dr. Ivy Van Sertima, which is one of the books we use in the class also. So we go through and look at this history of some of the history of the Moors in Europe, and we deal with Tariq ibn Ziyad going in 711 AD, defeating the Vandals and the Visigoths. But also we have to talk about General Tarif in July 710 AD going in with 400 foot soldiers and 100 horses, successfully carrying out a mission in southern Iberia. This was the reconnaissance mission in 710 AD, to get the land, to get the lay of the land and understand what's going on, understand what they're up against. Okay, so we go through and look at some of the history of the Moors and what the Moors introduced into Europe. We talk about the decline of the history of the Moors as well, how they lost power. We look at the three great West African kingdoms of Ghana, Songhai, and Mali. We talk about the film Black Panther and relationship between T'Challa, who is probably the richest man in the Marvel comic universe, and Black Panther, and Mansa Musa, who's the richest man in history. And there's an article from the History Channel, history.com, called "This 14th Century African Emperor Remains the Richest Person in History," from March 19, 2018. And it deals with the relationship between Mansa Musa, who became emperor of the Mali Empire in 1312 AD, and T'Challa. Okay, and we know in the Black Panther movie, T'Challa was portrayed by Chadwick Boseman. Now, West Africa is thriving in 14th century Common Era AD, at a time when Europe is ravaged by a lack of resources and raging civil wars. Mansa Musa's rule came at a time when European nations were struggling due to raging civil wars and a lack of resources. During that period, the Mali Empire flourished thanks to ample natural resources like gold and salt. All right. Now, we also had to talk about Christopher Columbus. Columbus is crucial to the spread of slavery and laying the foundation for racism, capitalism, and the exploitation of indigenous people. Columbus never came to the land we call the United States of America. When you look at where he went on his 4 voyages, he goes into Central America, he goes into South America, he goes into the Caribbean. He never comes to the land that we call the United States of America. The closest he comes here is Cuba, which is about 90 miles away. So we look at Columbus, and then we look at the transatlantic slave trade also, okay, and go through and analyze the transatlantic slave trade. The widespread enslavement of diverse peoples for economic and political gain has played a fundamental role throughout human history in the development of nations. Ancient Greek and Roman societies operated by using slave labor, as did many European countries in the modern period. As early as the Middle Ages, Mediterranean cities were supplied with Moorish black slaves from Muslim countries in North Africa. Okay, now, African slaves were brought to the New World shortly after discovery or uncovery by the colonizer Christopher Columbus. Upon his arrival, and Africans could be found on the island of Hispaniola, site of present-day Haiti, as early as 1501. Upon his arrival in the Bahamas, Columbus himself captured 7 of the natives for their, quote unquote, for their education on his return to Spain. However, the slave trade proper only began in 1518, when the first black cargo direct from Africa landed in the West Indies. That was because of the Asiento de Negros signed by King Charles V of Spain in August of 1518. The importation of black slaves or African slaves to work in the Americas was the inspiration of the Spanish bishop Bartholomew de las Casas, whose support of black slavery was motivated by humanitarian concerns. Now, de las Casas travels on voyages with Christopher Columbus, and he writes, keeps a diary. He writes books about this, and I read 2 of his books in college. Okay, Tears of the Indians, I think one of them was. But de las Casas writes about the atrocities inflicted on the indigenous population there. Okay, and he's going to insist on, he's going to suggest that Africans be enslaved, and to a lesser extent, white people also early on. Now, de las Casas argued that the enslavement of Africans and even some whites, proving that in the early period, slavery did not operate according to exclusive racial demarcations. He argued that they needed to stop enslaving the native population because this would save the indigenous American Indian populations, which were not only dying out but engaging in large-scale resistance as they opposed their excessively harsh conditions. As a result, King Charles V of Spain agreed to what's known as the Asiento de Negros. The Asiento de Negros, or the Asiento for short, or what's known as a slave trading license. This was in August of 1518. This would later represent the most coveted prize in European wars, as it gave to those who possessed it a monopoly in slave trading. So it was a license for slave trading companies, and it was a license for them to provide Spanish colonies with African slaves. So we go through and look at history like this, and we look at this history chronologically. Okay, so you can register for this 12-week online class, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. You can use this information with your children as well. We understand that African history and culture gives us our foundation, it gives us our values, our interests, and our principles, and it influences our economic empowerment, it influences our self-esteem, our self-development, and self-worth as well. There are also studies that show how teaching our children African history improves their performance in school, it improves their academic work also. So this class is on sale $60, regularly $130. We teach Saturdays, 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're going to teach this class today, so you can register now, join us in class. And we teach this at our online school, the African History Network online school. On Sundays, Black resistance movements from the Haitian Revolution, U.S. Civil War, Civil Rights Movement, and Black Power Movement. Same structure for that class, same price. Register for the bundle pack of courses. You get both classes for $100 as a $300 value. There's also bonus content that you'll get. You get 5 of my lectures that will be in the video library for free also. Okay. So I want to thank you all for joining us today. We had a great interview with Dr. Charles Finch, despite the technical difficulties. Remember, right knowledge corrects wrong behaviors, not over till we win. Wakanda forever. Also, you can support the African History Network, $ the AHN show through Cash App, $ the AHN show through Cash App, and through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN show. So this helps us keep